Good morning, good afternoon, and of course a very good evening to wherever in the world you may be. Today, I would like to bring to light a topic that is in constant debate in the United Kingdom, and that is the NHS. The NHS was formed in 1948 by the Labour government, with the mission to be comprehensive, universal and free at the point of delivery, with the principle of being based on clinical need and not the ability to pay. The first ever patient was 13-year-old Silver Diggory, whom was admitted with a liver complaint. From there on, the NHS has been one of the world's leading medical developers. It is credited with performing the first heart transplant, the first complete hand transplant, and discovering the links between smoking and lung cancer. It is also the biggest employer in Europe and the fourth biggest in the world. And in 2014, the Commonwealth conducted a healthcare survey of the 10 richest countries and found the NHS to be the best one overall and second best for equity control. This has all contributed to making the NHS a British national treasure, it would seem. Yes, so a lot of pride to be had within the NHS, and it was at its peak with providing first-class care for all of its patients. However, in recent years, the NHS has been the subject of a lot of debate, controversy and concern amongst the public. Why is this? Well, first off, the NHS is said to be constantly understaffed. Some areas of the NHS can't even recruit as there is not enough skilled people in the area to do the jobs. It was reported in 2017 that the number of jobs that have gone unfulfilled has risen 15.8%. However, it's not just skills. In 2017, the government was forced to lift the 1% pay gap on the NHS after campaigns stating that healthcare professionals don't get paid enough. Paramedics were losing an average £5,200, whilst nurses lost an average of £3,000 per year. Against inflation rising 15%, this put a lot of NHS staff under pressure, with their demanding jobs and of course their home affairs also. It was announced that police and prison guards were to get a pay rise, which of course sparked fury within the NHS and the trade union. They faced putting increasing pressure on the government to lift the pay gap, otherwise there will be strikes, putting the healthcare system in even further jeopardy. The government lifted the pay gap, but when questioned about the future of increasing pay and rise of costs, there was no comment from MP Jeremy Hunt. It would also be noted that the staff had to fight for the pay gap lift. They had to fight directors who earn more than the medical staff, who are actually getting hands-on with saving people's lives. There are directors of every hospital, clinical, commissioning groups, and even directors of the directors. Well, if we cut down on these directors, there would be more pay scope for doctors and nurses to consider, just to name a few. Same goes for the NHS outsourcing staff from other contract companies such as bank nurses and cleaners. If the NHS paid for them in-house, it would be cheaper as they would be paying a wage, not a contract. And just while we're on the subject of staff, the NHS sold their car parks off to private leaseholders. Well, these landowners then charged people for using the car parks. And yes, of course, this also included the staff. So the NHS staff save lives, but for little pay, get bossed about, and to add to insult, then pay for their own parking to go to work. Oh my God. Whoever has these thoughts come to mind, be greed or stupidity, well, or both, what sense do they see in it? Anyway, correlating with being understaffed, there is also a rise in the number of people needing treatment due to, yes, immigration and the increasing aging population. But I'm not quite sure what they expect to do about the latter. They'll probably cull all the pensioners. Selfish bastards, not dying quick enough. Anyway, in 2016, the Daily Telegraph reported that £181,000 was spent on treating 1 illegal immigrant with cancer, alerting people to urge the NHS to claim what money they can from foreign nationals who do not pay into the system. A further £42,000 bill was also footed by the NHS to treat a man from Ghana who was deported before he was even charged. So it seems to make less sense for the NHS to be making constant cuts when they treat just anyone who walks through their doors regardless, you'd think. Well, according to full facts, the NHS has set a target to recover £500 million to claim back from overseas patients that was not entitled to the free treatment. Well, yes, as expected, the results of how well that went seem to have sank faster than the Titanic into the black abyss. However, for 2017, they are only set to retrieve £346 million. This is due to tourists who hold a European healthcare insurance card, or the country having a health agreement with their country of origin, say. But still, £300 million is not to go amiss. So, to tackle the problem, in February 2017, the government changed the law so that the NHS had to check the eligibility of everyone claiming free NHS services. If you were not entitled, you would be charged 150% of the cost of treatment. This included charging people who have an accident on holiday, say, and need non-urgent care, and immigrants staying in the country less than 6 months who will be required to pay upfront for their health care. The government has supposedly also been charging a standard sum charge for people coming in from outside the EU before they can be entitled to free health care. At last, in this instance, it would seem the government are charging the right people for what they use, not just expecting the taxpayer to, as usually is the way. But another problem with the NHS is the way it is ran. The power of who runs the NHS has shifted back and forth over the years. During Margaret Thatcher's years, she set up an executive board to run the NHS so politics didn't have to get too involved with its running. Well, this didn't work, and the board was dissolved and the MP for Healthcare took responsibility again. This has since been repeated when NHS England was set up to control the budgets and delegate the right money to the right clinics. However, it has long been debated that NHS England is just a drain of money, resources, and current MP Jeremy Hunt still gets involved with the day-to-day running, to the point where he was phoning individual hospitals telling them to improve their waiting times and so forth. Oh, that's rich, considering that Jeremy Hunt has probably never had to wait for an appointment in his life. So currently we have MP Jeremy Hunt, as mentioned, CEO Simon Stevens, the Care and Quality Commission and Monitor, as well as 2 boards of senior civil servants. Do we really need all this management when the frontline staff are going through such a pay struggle? I'm surprised they don't hire individual people to wipe the very sweat beads from running down the backsides of the senior surgeons at this rate. Mind you, I probably shouldn't speak too soon. Anyway, following this, Professor Tim Briggs revealed his investigation report into the NHS quality and efficiency. His report looks into how the NHS could easily save £7 billion. This includes increasing infection control to save on antibiotics, and further treatment saving around £300 million, a reduced amount the NHS has took to court over medical mistakes and switched suppliers of medication and surgical supplies, additionally organising schedules more efficiently and effectively could create an extra 2 hours a day in operating theatres, sending emails instead of faxing paper, and reducing the amount of routine tests like bloods, etc. So instead of pay freezing the harder working staff, the NHS could just organise itself better and become more cost efficient to save up to the £7 billion. Additionally, the King's Fund had reported in 2017 that the NHS has halved its bed numbers over the past 30 years, from 299,000 to 142,000. This makes it so that the UK now has to have one of the lowest beds-to-person ratio within the EU. Practically all Western countries have reduced their bed space due to more medical advances, meaning people do spend a lot less time in hospital. But this adds to further pressure to staff. Endless stories of patients being left in corridors and other such places, and this dangerous overcrowding in hospital carries a high risk of increased infection spreading between patients alike. Now, no matter what you argue with the NHS, it's all mainly boiling down to just one thing. It's all political talk. Think about it. In early 2017, all the major newspapers' front pages read, "NHS has ran out of money." Well, how? The NHS is funded by several sources, mainly being from the national insurance payments, government funding and private healthcare. Not only that, but the NHS is a registered charity, people seem to forget that, and a public service accepting donations, and their end-of-year accounts are making a surplus of money, not a profit. The surplus also shows that the NHS has had more money coming in than going out for the 8 years previous to 2014. So the NHS was in fact making more money and is nowhere near in crisis. High-ranking doctors and surgeons are paid very handsomely to see that they are kept happy, despite numerous doctors and surgeons obtaining their medical qualifications abroad. Yes, 1 in every 3 GPs are said to be from overseas. Many of these doctors even gain their qualifications within their own countries, as it is often cheaper and doesn't take so long to be completed and obtained, so God only knows what their experiences are prior to entering the country. You know, Nigerian doctors in particular are said to be 8 times more likely to be investigated for gross misconduct. To top that, up to 72% of doctors who were struck off were foreign also. Just making a point of it. But regardless, the NHS is just a hot topic for any wannabe politician to talk about, because practically everyone in the UK wants to protect the NHS as much as possible. Apparently, for what it's worth, a BBC survey even found that over 60% of the public would embrace a 1% national insurance tax rise just to save the NHS. So any politician protecting it is instantly popular. Likewise, anyone who speaks against it loses faith in the people, just like David Cameron, who took a hit when he wanted to cut NHS public funding, making the UK the only country in Europe to be spending less on healthcare rather than more. Ironic, isn't it? Anyway, I say we go back to trading with druids and witch doctors at the small price of magic herbs, a brief exchange of a chicken's foot, and of course the generous donation of a goat's left testicle. At least if that were to happen, we would surely determine the more genuine cases from the endless amount of attention seekers about today who seem to think that even negative attention is better than no attention at all, even if that means a bit of self-mutilation, eh? Oh well, and with that, my dear poppets, another video comes to an end. So until next time, thanks for watching, thanks more so for those who subscribe, and as always, have a good morning, a good afternoon, a good evening, and of course a very good night to all.